Hiram is a PhD candidate in social and political science at the National Autonomous University of Mexico, and his research is right-wing movements, right-wing notions of childhood, and anti-gender movements. And today he will present to us his research on the conservative crusade for the child from the figurational perspective. So we're very much looking forward to it, and Hiram, the floor is yours.
Yes, thank you very much. It's a pleasure to me, and it was also a pleasure to be in Warsaw and in Poland in general last December. It was a really nice experience to me because it's a really different country than Mexico, but so similar in many ways that unfortunately some of them are really bad, like these conservative movements and people like that. But yes, we will see how this works out. And I will share my presentation right now with you. Oh, sorry. Just let me know if it's actually sharing.
Mhm. Yes, it works.
Okay, thank you very much. Well, this lecture, Mexico's Conservative Crusade for the Child, is a little bit dramatic title if you think of it, because I don't know, it sounds like a book chapter or like a book title. But doing my research in my first semester of the PhD, well, actually, it was like my third semester of the PhD. I did all of my theoretical chapters, all of my background chapters, and I found that it was really interesting to understand the conservative movements in Mexico through the lens of fighting for the child, or the crusade, the civilizing crusade for the child. Because at least from the 19th century, it was really clear to me that this was a central concern for a lot of conservatives around the world. And in Mexico, it was in the context of violence. It was in the context of two wars, especially the Reform War, that I will be talking about this a little bit later. But let's put this in perspective. Right here, I have three characters of the right in Mexico. These are called Eduardo Verástegui, América Rangel, and Liliana Telles. I'm sorry. And these people are trying from different trenches, from different perspectives, in and out of the Mexican state, to advance or to push an agenda that is centrally focused on children, not from the human rights perspective, but from the perspective of protecting them from corruption, protecting them from gender ideology, protecting them from I don't know, yes, the corruption of the far left ideology that has been embedded in Mexico, according to them. So this is the discourse that is nothing new. I know a lot of people here study all of these phenomena, so this is nothing new. But the historical echoes that they do across the Mexican history were really interesting to me, because they always speak about innocence and purity. That is something also central to the study of childhood studies, childhood sociology, etc. But in their perspective, they take it apparently they take it very seriously in the context of the Senate, in the context of local Congress, and in the context of trying to be an independent candidate for being president, in the case of Eduardo Verástegui. But I'm going to read this: the struggles associated with right-wing groups that incorporate childhood as a point of convergence with other movements are nothing new, although there visibly has increased in the Mexican context, with various figures rally around a supposed defense of the children. This not especially, but the Catholic note of all of this commentary surrounding children is especially important, because the classical things that anti-gender movements literature has studied over the past years, the nuclear family, the centrality of having a mother and a father, the right of the child to having a mother and a father, and women and men, not other types of family. So in this case, these different neoconservative figures, I call them in my thesis, are pushing different agendas, but focused on the childhood protection. For example, Eduardo Verástegui is also a producer and a cinematographer, and he has a, I don't know if that was especially popular in Poland, but he has a he published this movie called Sound of Freedom that is about child abuse. America Rangel is she talks about mutilations for trans children or for trans childhood, like we call it here in Mexico. And Liliana Telles is always protecting the children from the lack of pharmaceutical treatment for cancer, especially oncological treatment for children. But in their perspective, in the medical system or in the medical Mexican system, this money goes away to transformations, to trans gender assignments, and not to the children with cancer. So it's always related to the gender ideology. It's always respect to a progressive politics that they push their conservative agendas. It's not on the vacuum. It's always against something that the left is doing, or that the most progressive party in the Mexican context is doing. So this is their positioning over these matters. Um, Okay, this is a notion that I found that, especially in Europe, people found really concerning, because I don't know if because of the I don't know, the historical development of conservative movements in Europe. Uh, I have read and I have talked to people, for example, Professor Agnieszka Kosianska, and he told me that the political association between being a Catholic and being a nationalist and being a conservative is really well intertwined in Poland, in a lot of places, not only Poland, but also I think of Germany, I think of Slovenia, I think of Italy, for example. But in Mexico, we had a historical, a different case scenario, like an alternative scenario for nationalists, that being a Catholic or being a nationalist was not necessarily connected, and was not necessarily something that you could feel proud of, like being super Catholic and being super nationalist. As we have a one-party rule in the 20th century and a post-revolutionary war, it was really difficult to call yourself like a hyper-Catholic and a hyper-nationalist at the same time. And also in the 18th century, we had a war with the United States where, as you know, we lost half of our territory, and another were sales, but these sales were forced by war. I mean, this is talking about the beginning of the 2026. This is like really, this touches home, right? But yeah, we lose half of our territory in this war, so it was really fresh, this sentiment in politics of having a foreign threat, that being a nationalist, somehow it has become something that has to be related to being Mexican and to supporting the ruling party. I don't know if that has sense for you, but the beginning of this was the Reform War. Um, and this is the part of where Norbert Elias came to play in this, because they were really intelligent to frame liberals as unpatriotic or traitors by asserting that they undermine Catholic morality, customs inherited from Spain, as well by criticizing their tendency to copy foreign political models, as liberals emphasize the separation of powers and the secularism of the French Revolution. So in this case, the liberals in this country were really associated with the French Revolution, with Masonry also, with being traitors, but um, I'm sorry, at the same time, the conservatives were they went to Europe and tried to find a new monarch from the House of Habsburg, that it was Maximiliano de Habsburgo, Maximiliano Habsburg, that ruled the country for 3 years in the French intervention. I mean, right after the American intervention, we had a French intervention, and they were ruling in the country for 3 years. So being a conservative was related and still is related to that, to being to being politicians, to being people that needs the help of foreign powers to impose their agenda. And this is especially crucial for understanding today. For example, this is a quote for 2024 by Liliana Telles, that he is accepting, or he is in somehow begging for the help of the U.S. Army to liberate Mexico from cartels. These people doesn't care about the sovereignty discourse. They don't care about like the Second World War, world order. They are trying to sell to the foreign press, in this case Fox News, that we at this point we will know really well the discourse of Fox News. But she is admitting and trying to get help from the United States, especially from the United States military, and especially from President Donald Trump. So to this day, this is associated with the conservative wing in Mexico, like being the ones who always try to model um, uh, their policies from a foreign power or from a foreign policies. In the 19th century, that was France and Austria, but in the 20th century, with the hegemony of the United States well established in the world, of course, it is right now the United States. So we had this only to frame it, to give a little bit of context of what, when we talk about conservatives in Mexico, what kind of perspectives and inspiration from policies we are talking about. So this is it. Uh, and for example, in this world, in the reform world, the world that precede the Mexican Imperium from Maximilian of Habsburg, there was in the press a lot of different debates surrounding children, surrounding the future of children, and when the liberals were trying to secularize the country and to take away power from the church. I mean, this is a well-known process in the whole world, or in the whole modern world, but in Mexico it has his specificities. But it's strange to me, because what they were saying in 1859, this is something that you can say, you can find people in Facebook or in Twitter, I mean X, and all of these social media, saying things really resembling to this press from the 19th century, that is stripped of the majesty stamp of religion, or at least having its image distorted in the eyes of the common people. What will be the fate of women and children? These are helpless creatures whom godlessness treats with scorn and liberalism with mockery. Separation and divorce judgments will no longer be settled before the ecclesiastical authority, which is full of calm and prudence, but rather before the ignorant majors of the most backwater towns. Can one even imagine where society is heading with such procedures? So we can see here like the concern for the children and women, and that is also really something interesting that I found in my thesis. When the conservatives especially are talking of children, it's really difficult to them to separate that from the figure of the mothers, or for women in general, but especially they don't talk about children without the figure of the mother, or without the figure of the family. For modern studies of childhood, these people that are trying to understand childhood from a perspective of a citizenship, like posing this question: are children autonomous? Are children human beings with thoughts and feelings valid? Why are you still talking about with this connection to their mothers and to their family, that is obviously natural, but at the same time, for juridical questions, for different societal problems, it begins to create his own debates. So that was really interesting to me. That especially from this conservative perspective, it's really difficult to separate that. In the progressive discourse right now in Mexico, is always something related to the human rights, or to the human, or to the child and adolescents rights. But really difficult, even the progressive parties talk about the autonomy of children. And that is especially a word that frightens, I think, both parties, the progressive and the conservative ones, because autonomy for some of them is the keyword that leads to the legalization of pedophilia and stuff like this. So this question about autonomy and citizenship for children is nothing. It's not a small thing to talk about in these debates, and I think I need to explore a little more of that, and I don't know, that was just interesting in my thesis. So well, I right now I will give a leap to the 20th century. Well, the children in this century in Mexico, with the efforts to modernize Mexico, were we're beginning to be seen as actors of change, as actors of future, as actors of the development of the country. So always there is a lot. My I don't know, my conclusion of this, at least these two uh, first segments of this presentation, is that there is always a lot of pressure in what children need to do for society. There is always a lot of pressure to what children represent for the adult, and especially for the politicians. So in the 20th century, we have this. Well, we had the Mexican Revolution that was a little bit socialist inspired, but at the same time, the preceding historical thing for all of that was the Porfiriato. That was Porfirio Diaz. It was a mandatory that lasted for more than 30 years in the country, an autocrat, and he was trying to advance the positivism philosophy in Mexico, and it was through these techniques that Foucault would call it, no, the hygienics, the pedagogy, pediatrics, all of these new tools from the medicine, from the science in general, like science with capital S. So in this effort to modernize, always came across the children as a modernizing actor for the country. So for me, that's a lot of pleasure, a lot of pressure put into the children to trying to model, I don't know, an ideal of what will be the country in the next years, an ideal of what will be the modern citizens of Mexico in the mid 20th century. So I don't know. The question is not if they achieve this, or they not, but this really led to a lot of political of policies in the education that introduced the sexual education, and this was the beginning of another war between conservatives and liberals in the country. Um, in the 1930s, we had this historical process called the Cristero War, where basically the efforts to modernize and secularize Mexico were so harsh for some people in rural areas of Mexico, and Jalisco, El Bajío, Guanajuato, some states located in central Mexico, central rural Mexico. They begin to form civil militias to fight against the federal government. So they had like these wars. It was a process that lasted for another 3 years, and the spirits were really violent between the some head of the state that were promoting an atheism of state, really like trying to go trying to breach more around the secular state, and trying to transform trying to have something that resembles from an atheist state. I don't know how to call it exactly, but in this picture we have Álvaro Obregón, that was a president in the 1930s in Mexico. It's curious and it's paradoxical, because he accepted to be a godfather from one of his relatives in the Catholic Church. This is the central church in Mexico. cathedral, I'm sorry, but are read inside in the church as being he a figure, the maximum figure of the state power, the maximum representative of state power. He refused to knee in front of the institution of the Catholic Church. Um, this guy Alvaro Obregón was killed by by an extremist, by a right-wing extremist, and right now we have a park with his name. That's really paradoxical, but yeah, we have a park where this guy was killed, this ex-president was killed, but it was in this context. The Mexican state was seen as this actor, as this historical actor, with an habitus of trying to pervert the society, of trying to pervert the children, of trying to teach them sexual secrets, as one of the papers back in the day said. And the rural areas, the Mexican families, was seen as some actors that were trying to protect their ways of life. So I mean, this is nothing new. Even when today we can trace some parallels with movements like this. But I think the context was a lot of more violent. Right now we talk about polarization in the social media, etc. But when you have a head of state killed by an extremist, I mean, I think there is nothing more polarized than that. But yeah, this was the 1930s. Um, in the 30s and 50s, oh, let me check my time. I will go faster in these last slides. Yeah. In the 1930s and 50s, sex education was in the curriculum of public education, and we have like the reactions, especially from women. Right, we can see this demonstration. I think this is Hidalgo State. And they are protesting against sexual education because they were thinking that children doesn't even understand what they were going to be taught. So this is always from a perspective of the 21st century. I think this is the seed for understanding children as citizenship, because a group of people, I mean, adults, experts, teachers, scientists, people in the medical field, in the 50s and more, even in the 70s, were trying to understand what the children can absorb, can understand, and not only copy, and not only I don't know, not only repeat in their daily life. So this was a really um, fragile matter for the mothers and fathers of family back then. Um, this is from the 1930s. This a press called El Universal. This exists to this day. Do you agree with your sons and especially your daughters being mandatorily taught sexual secrets in schools? Whether you approve or disapprove, send your vote to the National Union of Parents. So this was the concern to them, like revelating the secrets of sex and revelating the secrets of their own bodies was something really scandalous back then, and this is scandalous even in to this day. I will skip some of my slides. This is from 2020. 2023. This is a television program in Mexico called TV Azteca, called Hechos. And they were criticizing the new public education books of being communist and or being socialist. I mean, this is like the most old school Red Scare for what we know, but in the context of Mexico, it was done in this particular television channel that is opposed to the actual regime, is opposed to the actual party in power, and they were saying that they were talking about a socialist education for the children, especially because they attack the effects of neoliberalism in this book, and they attack or they say they change words. For example, they emphasize the figure of the communities rather than the figure of the individual. So in their perspective, in their view, they say that this is leading to being a socialist country, and there was also a really antique discourse that Mexico was in their way to becoming a new Venezuela in the Latin American continent. So this is still to this day based on and pushed through a concern surrounding children. So to me, it's really interesting how we classify ourselves as being a barbarians or as being civilized passes through our policies surrounding children, or passes through around our policies concerning what we are going to teach to the children, and how we are going to think about the children, how we are going to conceptualize children in all of matters. So finally, also in the 21st century, these anti-gender movements are really held together transnationally with a lot of associations that maybe will result familiar. I mean, the Frente Nacional por la Familia, or la Manif pour tous, is especially well known around the globe. The World Congress of Families, Unión Nacional de Padres de Familia, that is a Mexican institution that is a really old one. It exists from previous of the revolution. Right after the revolution, it was formed, and also the PAN, Partido Acción Nacional, the one you see on your right, is the conservative party that has been accused of being moderate party. It has been accused of being like a coward right, a light right wing party, because it hasn't pushed policies to fight against the gender ideology and to fight against the I don't know, the legalization of same-sex marriage, etc., etc. So it's a sector of the Mexican civil society that is even criticizing these institutions that were really concerned about children. Right now, we're in a process where the civil society says to these parties, to these institutions, what you are doing is not enough to protect our children. You need to radicalize. You need to be more hardcore on your efforts to protect children. So, thinking about the children as a field of symbolic dispute, I also think how a lot of the Catholic and the rising evangelical sector in Mexico, that is also worth of saying. The development of the evangelical churches in Mexico has also led to a better organization in all of the anti-gender movements, and in all of that policies and pressures upon Mexican politicians to pass laws from a progressive perspective are being criticized, heavily criticized by people from the evangelical sector. Like, for many years, the Catholic Church was against all of the progressive policies, but they were playing in a more safe way. I mean, they were still playing like these classical right-wing maneuvers where they were trying to lobby within the state, they were trying to lobby within local Congress, but the evangelical sector that was not really close to the highest spheres of power in Mexico, they say, well, let's go to the streets, let's go to manifest, let's go to demonstrate, and let's go to really make our numbers count in these demonstrations. So they started to doing that, and they also allied themselves in one point with the Catholic Church. So these alliances were like really strange to think of in the 20th century. I mean, in Mexico, were people from the Catholic Church burning evangelical churches, but right now they are intertwined and they are united, their efforts to fight against these progressive policies. And it's always in the name of the children and the families, in the protection of these families. So when the progressive are thinking that, I don't know, having more rights to the children, for the trans children from trans childhoods, they say that that's a barbarian perspective. No, they say that that's an horrific perspective from them, because they are going to mutilate children. In Mexico, I mean, legally, nobody can get a gender reaffirming surgery under the age of 18, but they talk about mutilations for children and adolescents. So this kind of misinformation is really successful, because I think the check and balances are really are not really there. They are not like fact checkers trying to have these things. But even if they had, this is an ideological thing, so it doesn't have to be truth to to mobilize a lot of people. I mean, that I think that's a lesson from the real politics we are living right now. Um, one of these guys, Eduardo Verástegui, the cinematographer and producer that has this movie, Sound of Freedom. The movie was focused on the abuse of children, especially for sexual abuse. And in this movie, he has like a hint for the Epstein Island. I mean, this is the territory of fiction. But in the real policy, these guys are really close to the Republican Party and are really close to, especially Donald Trump. But in their view, he's trying to save Mexico from socialist policies, and he is trying or making an effort to save Mexican people from the spreading of communism. I mean, like not even socialism, from the spreading of communism in Latin America. And in their discourse, he is talking about liberalizing the economy, but he always talks about the efforts to protect children from children abuse. I mean, this is kind of paradoxical, like having Donald Trump as a friend, but he is trying to have this perspective. So this figure to me is really interesting because it resembles to the conservative back in the 19th century, going to Europe to find someone to model their policies, or going to Europe to find someone that saved Mexico from the perversions of liberalism. Only that now he is going with our neighbor, the United States of America, and the Republican Party, especially Donald Trump, to seek help to stop the party in rule right now. And the connection that he's trying to do with conservatives is with the Virgin of Guadalupe, that is like our Mexican, our local Virgin from Catholic origin. And he always talks about children. He talks about how the Virgin Mary stop children sacrifices from the pre-Hispanic eras, and he tries to do parallels with the Virgin of Guadalupe and stopping the abortion clinics or stopping the abortion policies. So they are really creative in the parallels that they found in history, and with the forms that they use history strategically to push their agenda. I mean, like every politician, but the ones that they do, I find especially dramatic and especially performative. But some of the closing remarks, I will finish with that, is that, well, the historical development of the Mexican nation state shaped shifting figurations that position liberals and conservatives with a dynamic as established versus outsiders. I mean, liberals, conservatives, barbarians versus the people that want to pervert your children, the people that want to your children to have public education. It was like a ball and in one floor and then the other. So we have this pendular movement surrounding who were the established and the outsiders. And depending on the balance of powers, these groups successfully label each other as either nationalists or unpatriotic traitors, defining the boundaries of political legitimacy. And Enlightenment ideals in early 20th century Mexico facilitated the sociogenesis of childhood as a distinct social sector. I mean, like the childhood born in the 20th century in Mexico. And this emerged alongside a civilizing project where the state, through hygiene and pedagogy, sought to mold ideal citizens and curb social deviations, turning the child into a focal point of preventing future societal ills. So it appears that the intentions appear to be always good, and the results are somehow sometimes are violent, sometimes are really scandalous with the civil society, but there is always this projection on what we are as a society now to the children as a potential to be in the future. So that I find that really interesting in my research. So well, with this I will close. I have a little bit more of that, but with this I talk about more of the Catholicization of the country. Well, I will only read this last one. Current disputes over sex education, trans childhoods, and diversity has transcended national borders, evolving into a global figuration. Mexico now deeply embedded in these transnational alliances that defend traditional family while often aligning with free market model, transforming local education policies into a global cultural battleground. So we also had a lot of this in the Mexican context. So yes, I think with this I will stop sharing my presentation, and yes, I think I will pass it to you, Marta. I don't know. Yes, thank you very much.
Thank you.